We as the ancient Egyptians embody the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, and that the masculine and feminine principle are ever present and active in all phases of existence, be it physical or spiritual. Many people do not know that gender, in its Egyptian sense, and sex, in the ordinary accepted use of the term, are not the same.
Welcome to Back to the Basics, where you learn facts, hope you embrace it. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. I'm fearless. Welcome to Back to the Basics, where you learn facts, hope you embrace it. Watch, like, share, bring in awareness. Watch, like, share, bring in.
The word gender is derived from the Latin root meaning to beget, to procreate, to generate, to create, to produce. As you can clearly see, the word has a much more general meaning than the term sex. Sex only refers to the physical distinction between male and female. In other words, sex is a manifestation of gender on the physical plane. Now, I must inform you that there's a distinction between the Egyptian teaching and modern teachers who exaggerate the Egyptian doctrine with appalling theories regarding sex. No creation physical is possible without this most sacred doctrine of gender. For the doctrine of gender is solely that of creating, producing, and generating, and its manifestation are visible on every plane of existence. Thus, everything and every person contains the two elements of this great doctrine within. To be clear, every male has the female element within him, and simultaneously every female contains the male element within her. We can also see this during the very early development of the human embryo, where there is no anatomical indication of the sex of the child, where the gonads appear neutral, each having an inner portion of the testicular material as well as an outer zone of ovarian tissue. We find a distinct manifestation of the doctrine of gender amongst the atoms, genes, and DNA, of which constitute the basis of matter and flesh. The latest word of science is that the atom, which was previously thought to be indivisible, is composed of a multitude of subatomic particles vibrating at a high degree and intensity called quarks. The accompanying statement is made that the formation of the atom is really due to the clustering of negative electrons around positive protons and neutrons. The positive protons seem to exert a certain influence upon the negative electrons, which form or generate or generate an atom. Now, since we are all made up of atoms, we can now conclude that the doctrine of gender is ever present. According to the Greek teachings as it pertains to electricity, the masculine principle of gender is always identified with the positive pole, and the feminine principle of gender is always identified with the negative pole. This is not so in the ancient Egyptian teaching, where both poles are negative and positive. The terms positive and negative are very wrongly applied to this phenomenon by science. The so-called negative pole of a battery is really the pole in which the generation or production of new forms and energies is manifested. There is nothing negative about it. The best scientific authorities now use the word cathode in place of negative. The word cathode comes from the Greek word meaning a way down or descent, the path of generation. As you can see, the doctrine of gender continues to be present. The cathode or negative pole is the mother of all electrical phenomena and of the finest form of matter as yet known to science. So, you see that we, the ancient Egyptians, are reasonable in refusing to use the term negative in our consideration of the subject and in insisting upon using the word feminine in place of negative in speaking of that pole of activity. So when scientists teach that the creative atoms or electrons are composed of negative electricity, we instead say that they are composed of feminine energy. I must take this time to caution you that the ancient Egyptian teaching is always balanced, and thus the feminine energy does not function alone. If you seek feminist teaching, you must go elsewhere for them, for the ancient Egyptian doctrine on gender contains nothing for you along these lines. When the feminine energy is alone, it is unbalanced. It being unbalanced by its natural impulse to create new forms of matter or energy seeks a union with a masculine energy. This unity forms the basis of the greater part of the activities of the chemical world. When the feminine particles unite with a masculine particle, a certain process is begun. The feminine particle vibrate rapidly under the influence of the masculine energy and circle rapidly around it. The result is the birth of a new atom. In fact, we are viewing a hermaphroditic conception, for this new atom is composed of a union of the masculine and feminine energy. But when this union is formed, the atom is a separate thing, having certain properties. The process of separation of the feminine electron is called ionization. These electrons or atoms are the most active workers in nature's field, arising from their unions or combinations, and thus manifest the various wonders of light, heat, electricity, magnetism, attraction, repulsion, chemical affinity, and the reverse, and similar phenomenons, all called chaos. And all this arises from the operation of the doctrine of gender on the plane of energy. So, we can now conclude that the masculine principle in nature directs a certain inherent energy towards the feminine principle, and thus starts the creative processes, which has already begun in the female called ovulation. This means that the feminine principle is the one always doing the active creative work, the God being. And yet each doctrine is incapable of operative energy without the assistance of the other. After their separation in the very beginning, when divided into two daughter cells, not son cells, to become what we are today, male and female. In some of the forms of life, the two principles are combined into one organism, and this is how humans started. With that said, everything in the material world manifests both genders. I'm Kef Ray, and this is Back to the Basic. Like, share, and subscribe.
Facts we stated, you wanna know something, go back to basics. Most saw trapping was called the Matrix. The world frivolized, yet it's hard to face it. So I spread truth, hope you embrace it.